So a friend said to me, Bruce, it's only Easter. Don't get yourself all stressed out. I mean, what are you going to say that you haven't already said over 40 years? No, his casualness surprised me, and his kind of playful chiding got me thinking, what am I going to say that I haven't said before? So I spent a lot of time on my thinking chair, and I wondered about Mary, particularly as she made her way to the tomb in the dark, and the disciples as well. And I thought about them, about how they did not expect to discover a living Jesus. And all the gospel stories suggest that there was a bit of reluctance in them. Even after they recognized him, there was still some uncertainty and doubt. So that means that they first had to overcome unbelief. Because for them, they were certain. They were certain that Jesus had been crucified, dead, and buried, and was gone. And their certainty had to be dismantled. I read that Easter faith enables us to move beyond believing only what we can see and entrusting our lives to the God who raised Jesus from the dead. It's a different path, a whole new way of seeing life, seeing the possibilities of new light, of seeing the light that shines in the deepest darkness, seeing the hope in the midst of any despair. So I've been wondering what kind of new life will come out of this past year. As COVID forced us into so much isolation and detachment and fear. Now, granted, our geography has benefited us. At least we could sit outside with the sun shining, or swim in our pools, or feel the warm breeze throughout the year. Daily we were able to get some fresh air. But think about the people who live in Minnesota or Wisconsin. Think about the people in Iowa or Vermont or maybe even Ontario. Think about the isolation and detachment. What was a norm for us is not necessarily a norm for others in our country as well as throughout the world. See, this pandemic has negatively impacted our best intentions. It's robbed life of breath. It's resulted in trauma and chaos. What kind of new life will be resurrected for us as we take off our masks and as the vaccine begins to do its work? See, I think Jim Wallace is right, of the Sojourners, who writes this pandemic has become very revealing about our society, the culture in which we live in. There are gaping holes in safety nets, disparity in education and health care. What kind of new life do we need to shine into the darkness that perhaps we have ignored or accepted for far too long? What light will we shine as we live deeper into caring for the most vulnerable, the least of them, as the Bible tells us? What kind of life can a resurrected life be for us now? I was reminded of an old story of a wise pastor who lived in a small community, and one day he summoned all the people into the village square. And he said to them simply, I have an important announcement to make. Now the people gathered with reluctance and much grumbling because it's inconvenient to stop what you're doing and just show up because some wise pastor invited you. People resented leaving their businesses. They had chores to complete, but out of respect, they went to the town square. And when they were all present, kind of like today, the pastor simply said, I wish to announce that Christ is in the world. That's all he said. And yet the people understood. They knew they had been acting as if Christ did not exist. Well, friends, the resurrection says that Christ is in the world. Christ is in our lives. And I want you to hear that the risen Christ who first was encountered by those who lived in this ancient past is the very same Christ who now works in our lives today, who lives in our very beings. Because we live as Easter people. Knowing the power of resurrection, God literally brings us new life. The risen Lord changes our inclinations to hurt each other into a desire and a commitment to help one another. The risen Lord alters our reactivity toward dismissing social disparities and inequalities by inviting us to respond with goodness. The risen Jesus moves us toward a future of righteousness and peace. That's the promise of Easter. And as believers, we manifest that risen Christ as those who simply do not talk about Jesus or simply celebrate Jesus. We embrace God's promise that we belong to the maker of heaven and earth. We belong to the one who enables us to love each other, to forgive when we mess up, to hope, to live in a different way, a way in which we care for others. Jesus taught us not merely about love, he invites us to love others. Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, writes, the gospel tells us we are loved, and in asking us to receive and consent to that love, gospel asks us to identify with and make it our own. Make love comprehensive in our lives. The old gospel tune is ever so correct. Because he lives, hear it, we can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future. And life is worth living because he lives. So we can choose to let loose the crafted obstacles and idols that get in our way, because the resurrection offers new possibilities to live as authentic expressions as God desires. We are people filled with a love that has no boundaries. A love that will not let gravity bend itself inward. A love that will not let the darkness of death overcome it. Easter is a summon for us to say yes to new life. It may not be an easy path, but is the most meaningful way to live each day. And at the end of the day, whatever our reluctance, it takes something to entrust our lives to the kind of hope that God awakened in the resurrection of Jesus. So don't be reluctant to take that step. Be open to new life. And on this Easter morning, remember, always remember that new life emerges because the resurrection reveals the power of God's love. So my friends, enjoy the rest of this holy day. Enjoy all the food that you will share and the family and friends that you gather with. Enjoy the music and be grateful and generous and be alive to what is possible. It's a very, very good day. It's the day of resurrection.